This is Jamie Court in Santa Monica. We're going to get going with the press conference for anyone on the line in about 1 to 2 minutes. 1 to 2 minutes. Okay, 1 to 2 minutes. We're just making sure we've got it set up. Okay, so we're going to get going now for everybody on the line. I'm Jamie Court. I'm president of Consumer Watchdog, and here with the Yes on 46 campaign, and we're so fortunate today to have with us Dr. Stephen Loyd. I'm Carmen Baller, executive director of Consumer Watchdog. We're here today because Prop 46 is going to save lives. It's going to help patients who are threatened by impaired physicians, by the overdose threat, by negligence that is undeterred. And Prop 46 deals with these issues in a comprehensive way. Most importantly, for today's event, we really want to talk about the prescription drug crisis in America, and we want to talk about the prescription drug crisis as it relates to physicians. Because we know in California and around the nation, about 2% of physicians at any given time are with a substance abuse. So in California, that's about 2,600 physicians at any given time who are likely to have a substance abuse problem. And unfortunately, there's one physician in America who's talking out about substance abuse. Not unfortunate because he's talking out, but unfortunate because there's only one. And he's with us today. That's Dr. Stephen Loyd. We started Prop 46 because what it does is it will make sure that if a physician tests positive for substance abuse on the job, they will be suspended until they're treated. And in the case where we have serial offenders, they could lose their license. But all Prop 46 really does is make sure that we have the same protections that apply against impairment in hospitals and in doctors' offices as we do with pilots and with bus drivers and other public safety positions. And the Medical Association and the malpractice insurers who have spent literally $58 million against Prop 46 have failed to acknowledge that substance abuse among physicians is a real problem and that random drug testing and drug testing after adverse events is a valuable way to deal with this issue. And so fortunately, we have Dr. Loyd who's come to town to talk to us about what it's like to be a doctor who's addicted to drugs and how self-policing in the medical profession is almost non-existent. And I think it's even worse in California than it is around the rest of the nation. So I'm happy to welcome Dr. Loyd, who, by the way, has been generous enough to be featured in the Yes on Prop 46 television ads that you'll now see in Los Angeles as well as across the Bay Area. And we can show you those ads later if you're interested. But let me bring on Dr. Loyd to talk a little about what this issue is about for patients and what this issue is about for physicians.
Can I get your name one more time, please?
Sure. It's Jamie Court, J-A-M-I-E-C-O-U-R-T, and I'm president of Consumer Watchdog.
Right, my name is Dr. Stephen Loyd. That's S-T-E-P-H-E-N, and the last name is Loyd, 1-L-O-Y-D. I'm an associate professor of medicine at the Quillen College of Medicine at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, Tennessee. I'm also the chief of medicine at the hospital that I work at in Johnson City. Until 10 years ago, I was addicted to prescription narcotics myself, opiate narcotics, Vicodin, and benzodiazepines, mainly Xanax and Valium. Was taking up to 100 pills a day at the very end. I've watched this race from about 2,500 miles away in my home in East Tennessee, and I've been appalled at some of the things that I've seen. There are two prongs of Proposition 46 that I can speak directly to with personal experience. Number one is mandatory drug screening of doctors. We have an inability to police ourselves. We're the only profession that I know of that is called on to police ourselves, but we have failed at that miserably over the past decades. In Tennessee, we have a physician's health program that maintains advocacy for impaired physicians, and we do a pretty good job of it in Tennessee. In California, you do not have that. By the numbers, about 2% of physicians are impaired at any given time, which means that you have 2,600 physicians that are impaired today in the state of California. Disciplinary actions against impaired physicians in California have averaged 32 physicians over each year over, I think, the past 10 years. And so you say, well, we don't have a problem. We've only had 32 disciplinary actions per year over the past 10 years, but we know that those numbers are way off. You don't have a mechanism to reach these folks. These physicians are impaired, and they're treating patients on a daily basis, and you do not have a mechanism to reach them, and that's an issue. That's a big problem, and I'm speaking with authority on this subject because I was one of those impaired physicians. When you're under the influence of prescription narcotics, benzodiazepines like Valium and Xanax, or opiate narcotics like Vicodin or OxyContin, you overestimate your ability to take care of patients. I did. I didn't feel like I needed sleep. I didn't feel like I needed food, water, or anything that normal people need. I felt like I was sharper. I felt like I took better care of patients, when the reality was it was dangerous. It was extremely dangerous. I want you to think about that. How comfortable would you be getting on an airplane with a pilot who was under the influence of Vicodin or Xanax and felt like his ability to fly the airplane was better under the influence of those drugs? I'm getting ready to fly home tonight back to the Tri-Cities in Tennessee, and I can tell you that if I knew my pilot was on OxyContin or Vicodin, I would be getting off of the airplane, and I would walk back to Tennessee. Okay, I don't care if he felt like his ability to fly the airplane was better, but I'm confident in the airline industry and their ability to police their pilots from a drug and alcohol standpoint. We do not have those same standards when it comes to physicians. In California, you have no mechanism to be able to do that. Only 32 disciplinary actions against doctors for misusing drugs or alcohol averaged over the past 10 years. It's pathetic. And you have really some of the things that I've seen, as I followed this campaign have really been appalling to me. I saw a cardiologist from UCLA who said that, well, that means that we could be at dinner and be called on to be drug or alcohol screened. Well, I think as a profession we're going to find very little sympathy from the general public that we may have our dinner interrupted because somebody may call us for a drug or alcohol screen. And I don't think we're going to intentionally go out and look for people who are having a glass of wine at dinner. I think he's missing the overall point. Another thing that I saw was that, well, we're going to, neurosurgeons are going to be held to the same standard as maybe a family medicine doctor, and a family medicine doctor has much less chance of hurting people on a wide scale as maybe a neurosurgeon. Therefore, this is not fair. I want you to stop and think about that for a second, okay? A neurosurgeon is doing brain surgery, and yes, he does have the potential to hurt patients, but so does a family medicine doctor who's making life and death decisions about medication interactions in his office on a daily basis. It may not be on the grand scale of a surgery, but it certainly does in prescribing medications. So I don't think that you separate out doctors based on what kind of doctor they are. Another objection that I've heard is, why not subject nurses to this since we're talking about the healthcare profession? Well, I do think nurses need to be subjected to it, but not under provisions of Prop 46. And the reason being is that nurses aren't held to the same standard when it comes to advocacy. For the most part, when nurses are found to be substance abusing, the first thing the hospitals do is they fire them, okay, because it doesn't cost as much to make a nurse as it does a doctor. So they get rid of them right off the bat, and for that reason, I don't support it. We're talking about intervening on doctors and suspending them, giving a chance of getting their life back or a better life. If you look at my life over the last 10 years, I'm the chief of medicine at my hospital. My life has done nothing but improve. I take better care of patients. I got another chance at the medical profession. I thank God every night that I go to bed that somebody intervened on me and helped me, okay? And I think we're looking at this all wrong. We need to be looking at this as an opportunity to step into the life of doctors who are putting patients at risk and whose own lives are going down the drain and helping them. And the byproduct of that is going to be improving patient safety. It happened for me, and it can happen for them. There are doctors out there in the state of California right now that are going to see this press conference. They're going to be in the bathrooms of their hospitals using drugs, and maybe they see this and maybe they see that there is hope. The problem you guys have in the state of California is you've got no mechanism to give them any hope. What do? Do they call the medical boards and ask for help? If they do, you don't have a mechanism to even help them. Even if they wanted to self-report, what are you going to do with them? And that's an issue. The fact that you only have so few cases of doctors who you've disciplined doesn't tell you anything except you've got your head stuck in the sand. The second part of the initiative that I have experience with is the database. In Tennessee, we have a controlled substance monitoring database that we've been required to query since April of 2012. We have a huge problem in the Appalachians, which is where I'm from, of prescription narcotics abuse. It's literally killed a generation of our kids. Per capita, Tennessee is third in the nation for prescription drug abuse, only behind West Virginia and Alabama, and that's very small percentage points. Since we have instituted mandatory querying of the prescription monitoring data bank, we've decreased doctor shopping by 46%, and we've increased prosecution of doctor shoppers by over 120%. What does that mean? That means we're driving down people's ability to acquire prescription narcotics. We'll drive down overdose deaths. Okay, it saves lives. You know, when I came out here in August and filmed the commercials that are running in California right now, I was just amazed at some of the pushback of querying the data bank. The data bank already exists. Okay, the pharmacists are already reporting to the data bank. We're talking about having physicians query the data bank. It's already there. The money's already appropriated for it. All they're going to do is query it before they write a prescription for controlled substance. That's it. And so I got back home and I asked my friends who, you know, we had the uproar in Tennessee. Well, we don't have time to check it. Okay, it's going to take away our time for patients. We've got shrinking reimbursements. We're barely able to keep the lights on. All the things I'm hearing from California now. Privacy issues. We haven't had a data breach of our data bank yet. Yet hospitals and other industries continue to have data breaches. We haven't had a breach yet. I asked my friends when I got back home, who are all surgeons and orthopedic surgeons, family medicine docs, tell me what you guys think about having to query the data bank. It's not an issue. They don't think anything about it. Somebody from the office checks it for them before they write a prescription for controlled substance. It's a non-issue. These are all scare tactics being used by people who don't want to change, and it will save lives. If you think about the impact this can have in the state of California, Tennessee only has 9 million residents. You all have got 9 million residents off of one exit ramp in L.A., okay? This place it boggles my mind when I come out here of how many people are here. You have more prescription drug abusers probably in L.A. County than we have in the whole state of Tennessee. Look at the potential impact of this. Every time I come here, I'm just amazed at how short-sighted California is being on this subject. And I thought you all were supposed to be the enlightened ones. Okay? This is about saving people's lives. If you look at the prescription monitoring data bank and you start to identify people who are doctor shopping, guess what? These are people with addictive disease. These are people that we can reach out to and treat and change their lives. Substance abuse is not a moral defect. It's an organic disease of the brain. And we can start talking about treating them and give them 50 years of life. So stop looking at it as being punitive. Stop looking at it as being punitive for doctors. You've got a certain amount of your doctors who are criminals, and they need to go to jail for overprescribing and trading drugs for sex and selling prescriptions. Those guys need to be in jail. But the majority of your doctors need education. They need rehabilitation. They need to be taken out of practice, rehabilitated, put back in practice. And you can say, well, we're suspended them. That's punitive. You bet it's punitive. But they're not treated like the regular population, or they'd go to jail right off the bat. They need to get down on their knees and thank God at night that they're not going to jail and they're being given the opportunity to get their licenses back in the future when they've been rehabilitated and taught the proper way to prescribe. So I think you need to change the focus of what you're looking at and look at this as a rehabilitative opportunity as well. So those are the reasons that I'm out here. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. I think Carmen wants to share some statistics with you.
Yeah, I think we're gonna talk about these medical board statistics, and we're also going to play an ad that's been playing that's been really deceptive, and wanted to get both Dr. Loyd's response to it, and the campaign is going to be calling for that ad to be taken down because it really misrepresents this prescription drug database, the Cures database, which is meant to help people, and to have doctors attacking it and malpractice insurers attacking it as the greatest threat to privacy that ever existed is really bad for society, not just for Prop 46. So I'll let Carmen talk a little about what we've learned from looking at 10 years of experience with the medical board.
Hi, I'm Carmen Balber, B-A-L-B-E-R. I'm the Executive Director of Consumer Watchdog. Evan, if you could put up that first statistic I gave you, just the words. I want to talk just a little bit about the provision of Proposition 46 that requires mandatory drug testing of doctors, because the problem we have here today in California, which, as Dr. Loyd told you, is that no one has the ability to catch and stop dangerous doctors if they're practicing medicine under the influence. Here in California, the California Medical Board cannot require a drug test of a doctor who is suspected of abusing drugs or alcohol without going through a years-long disciplinary process. That's not quick enough to protect patients who are in harm's way when a physician is practicing under the influence. The statistic that I'm going to ask him to pull up, and when he gets it up, you'll be able to take a look at it, is a Public Records Act request that we received from the Medical Board of California asking them for statistics on their enforcement actions over the last 10 years. From 2003 through 2013, the California Medical Board has disciplined 326 doctors for self-use of drugs or alcohol, 326 doctors, out of a total of about 3,300 doctors. So 10% of all disciplinary actions are because of physician drug use. That's a big percentage, but it's an extraordinarily concerning percentage when you actually break down the numbers. That means if 326 doctors were disciplined over 10 years, it's an average of 32 doctors a year. 32 doctors a year doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not, because we know from the California Medical Board's own numbers that 2% of California doctors have a substance abuse problem at any time. So just 32 doctors of the 2,600 doctors who have a substance abuse problem right now here in California will be disciplined for that substance abuse. That's appalling. California has no power to detect and stop doctors with drug problems right now, and that's what Proposition 46 will do. Importantly, Proposition 46 will Proposition 46 will require the medical board to suspend the license of a doctor who is found to be using drugs or alcohol on duty, and that's the reform that's so desperately needed in California. That number finally got up. You can catch it after.
So we have some handouts that we can share with you with these statistics, but and I just looked, 10 years of statistics show that while it's about 10% of disciplinary actions for a substance abuse, the numbers are just so pitifully low that we're obviously not dealing with this problem. And what I should elaborate on that Dr. Loyd mentioned is, while there is no state with mandatory drug testing, the fact is that the medical boards in almost every state in America can demand that a doctor take a drug test or there be a consequence. In California, we cannot demand that doctors take drug tests. Our medical board cannot demand it. The only way a doctor is forced in this state to take a drug test is if you actually prove the case against them to the point where you're about to take their license, which really takes about 5 to 6 years. And at that point, as a condition of suspension or taking an action short of losing their license, you can ask the doctor to agree to take drug tests in order to keep their license. But we in 2008 got rid of a program we had called the Physician Health Program, also called the Diversion Program, because for decades the medical board had allowed doctors who were going to be disciplined to go into this diversion program in lieu of discipline. And 5 state audits found it was fraught with fraud. There was recidivism. There was a revolving door. Doctors would just keep using, going back into the program, keep using, and patients were getting hurt. So the legislature, which is no paragon of action, pulled the plug on this diversion program. And since 2008, no one's bothered to reinstitute the ability of the medical board to create drug testing for doctors. So if the medical board gets a report that a doctor's using heroin, it can't drug test the doctor. They have to call the DEA to raid their offices. And that's just insane. I mean, we live in a state where patients are at risk and the medical board's not empowered to do anything. And Prop 46 begins to change that. So the second provision of Prop 46 that we're talking a little bit more about today is this mandatory use of the Cures database. And this is really a simple issue. I'm going to ask Evan in a second to play this ad. There's an ad up now that the No on 46 side, which is, again, malpractice insurers and the medical profession, have put up. And here's the ad.
There's a secret inside Proposition 46, a troubling provision that puts your personal medical information at risk. It's right here.
Prop 46 requires doctors to consult a vulnerable government-run database containing your personal prescription drug history, open to law enforcement, hackers, identity thieves, or simply accidents. And there's no money in Prop 46 to secure the database.
Invading our privacy. Another serious risk. And why to vote no on Prop 46?
Back up a little bit, Evan, on that ad. So I just want to...
Identity thieves, or...
All right. So if you just stop here, this ad has been called an outright lie. Actually, not called, has been rated an outright lie by the Sacramento Bee, which is the worst rating it has for political ads. And in fact, there hasn't been another ad that's gotten outright lie this election season, although it's young. The ad was called jaw-droppingly dishonest by the LA, deceptive, jaw-droppingly deceptive by the LA Times, and shamelessly deceptive by the Oakland Tribune and Contra Costa Times. And we are calling upon the No on 46 campaign to take this ad down. The Cures database is protected by the Department of Justice. It has never been breached. It is as safe a database as there is, and there was money allocated in the legislature, despite what the ad says, for an upgrade just this year, and the Medical Association supported it, so they know there's money to upgrade it. But here is maybe the most outrageous part. This headline, Hospital Network hacked 4.5 million records stolen, which seems to suggest that the Cures database is what's vulnerable here. That's what the words say. It's going to be a hacker's haven. Well, the hospital network that is breached gave $350,000 to the Hospital Association PAC that gave $5 million to the effort against No on 46. In other words, the No on 46 campaign is responsible for this data breach, and yet they're saying use of the database in 46 will result in it. That's how you get outright lie, I guess, by the Sacramento Bee. So we're calling now for the No on 46 campaign to pull this ad because it's doing a lot of damage to the use of this database, which is now happening. I mean, doctors do use it. Doctors are not required by law to check it, but if you're an emergency room doctor, 6% of the doctors in the state now use this database to make sure that the people coming to them are legit and need a prescription. They want to know their drug history. So I just wanted to get Dr. Loyd's response to some of the claims here, because in Tennessee they do have this mandatory use, and I just find it's something that if the doctors don't correct this and pull down this ad, what's going to happen is there's going to be long-term damage to providers who use this database and the way consumers think about this database.
Yeah. I saw this ad for the first time last night, and the first word that popped into my mind was unethical. The number one thing that doctors in my state have at their disposal to combat prescription drug abuse is the Controlled Substance Monitoring Data Bank. There's all kinds of literature that says that our gut feeling about a patient, whether or not they are a pain medicine seeker, is no good. It's just like me predicting how long you have to live with end-stage cancer. The patient's guess is often as good as my guess. We need something objective that we can hang our hats on, and we can hang our hats on the Controlled Substance Monitoring Data Bank. And this is universal all across the country. And my guess is it's even universal among the California medical boards. They know that the Controlled Substance Monitoring Data Bank is a good thing, and they know it's a good weapon to prevent prescription drug abuse. So when I saw this ad, I was really appalled that they had taken this angle on it. This ad will cost people their lives. Doctors being able to query this ad can figure out who the doctor shoppers are and direct them to treatment as opposed to writing them more medication, which will run their morphine equivalents up to a level that could cause them potentially overdose and die. And to me, that's criminal. And I really don't know how to make it much stronger than that.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll take any questions. I'll start in the room, and then maybe we'll go to the phone lines if there's anyone on.
Yeah. Did you folks, did Consumer Watchdog write this proposition?
The proposition was written by Bob Pack, who lost his two children to a drug addict who had 2 DUIs and doctor shopped, and she then got high at the wheel, fell asleep, swerved off the road, and it killed the 7- and 10-year-old children of Bob and Carmen Pack. Bob's the author of this initiative. He's also the guy who created the modern electronic cures database in the state of California to prevent this from happening to anyone else. And Bob also, when he went to hold the doctors accountable, the woman actually is in jail now because it was just such an egregious crime and she had previous DUI convictions, but he went to hold Kaiser accountable. And he found out that Kaiser didn't check on her symptoms, prescribed thousands of prescriptions, and there was no electronic database that they could rely on. So he found we needed the database, but he also tried to get legal justice, and he realized at that point that his children's lives were only worth $250,000 under the law, under this 38-year-old cap that we are indexing for inflation in Prop 46, which is the last piece of Prop 46. So he's the author, and his experience directly informs why we're doing this initiative.
And is that the reason why there's the release on the malpractice caps?
Exactly. The malpractice cap is indexed for inflation, not removed, because Bob and other victims have tried to get access to justice. Bob went to 10 attorneys to get his case taken. Very hard to hold the Kaiser accountable in the system where the most you can recover is $250,000 in the death of a child or the death of a senior, someone who's non-wage earner or doesn't have medical bills. And what happens is the other side knows that, and so to get a $250,000 case to trial, you actually have to spend about $100,000 or more in witnesses, expert witnesses, depositions, costs. That comes out of the $250,000 you may be able to collect as your attorney's fees. So it's not about getting $250,000. It's about victims of malpractice or overprescribing or impaired physicians not being able to get an attorney and any access to justice. They get $0. And that is the third prong of this initiative, and it was informed by Mr. Pack, who's from Northern California.
And there's been a lot about the trial lawyer involvement. What has been their contribution to the campaign so far?
$6 million, which is about most of the money in the campaign, and probably should be more. But it is about the people who do have some money who are able to get TV ads. Our opponents have $8 million. We have $6 million. The vast majority came from attorneys who have witnessed this injustice in the legal system. We are not eliminating the cap, and I should tell you that half the states in America do not have a cap on damages. We're simply indexing it for inflation. Those include New York, Florida, which just had its cap thrown out for constitutional reasons. If the attorneys had written this down, Mr. Pack, there might be no cap on damages, but we've indexed it for inflation. Fortunately, we found people who understand the inequities in the justice system, and they've contributed money to help us get on the air, but we are still outgunned, at $60 million to $6 million. What is that? 10 to 1? More than that? 6 to 1? 6 to 1. So it's a really significant campaign for justice. It hasn't changed in a long time.
10 to 1.
10 to 1. 10 to 1. All right. So you need a doctor to do your stats for you. Sorry. Any other questions, sir?
Jamie, going back to the ad that mentions the 4.5 million reached, can you give me more specific information on where that 4.5 million comes from? I mean, it says CNN money. Where is?
Well, it comes from community health system. You want to talk about it?
Was it in the state of California then, Carmen?
It's either community health systems or community hospital systems. They're a nationwide hospital chain. They have several facilities in California, and that is a breach of not even medical records at their facility. It's actually a breach of financial information, patients' names, Social Security numbers, things along those lines. So not only is this a breach at a facility run by one of the folks spending money to put this ad on the air, but it's in fact not even a breach of a medical record or a prescription record. It has nothing to do with cures.
And it's community health systems.
In fact, opponents of Proposition 46 have had more than 10 million records breached in their facilities over the last several years. We did a little research into data breaches at some of the other facilities of supporters of our opposition and found at least 10 million records breached at those facilities. So it's the medical providers and the hospitals that are so adamantly opposed to these patient safety provisions who need to worry about protecting patient data.
You would think that hospitals would support the proposition in order to prevent lawsuits and loss of their patients. Why is it you think that hospitals and the medical community is so set against it?
Well, I think, first, the dirty little secret in the opposition campaign of Prop 46 is that it's malpractice insurance companies who don't want to pay out for impaired physicians who are funding the lion's share of the opposition. $45 million against Prop 46 has come from malpractice insurers. That is because these malpractice insurers have been getting rich, not paying out claims and taking in premiums. Hospitals and doctors, why do they oppose this? I'll let maybe Dr. Loyd talk a little bit about this. My hunch is they just don't want any more controls. And the first control that comes upon your profession, then there comes something else. I think they realize, many of those people in the medical profession like Dr. Loyd, that these are reasonable provisions, but they're portraying them as though they're the tools of the devil. I mean, and that vitriol and that dishonesty tells us that we actually need to police this profession more, because a profession that can't be honest in a television ad about a database and patient privacy, how can they be honest about turning other doctors in who are abusing substances or committing negligence? Their own ads and the way they have carried themselves in this campaign shows exactly how retrenched they are and why we need to reform this profession. And malpractice insurers' money is the money that is trying to protect them.
Stephen, if you could add to that just a word or two about how none of your colleagues did turn you in. No one identified.
Absolutely. One of the things I teach our medical students and residents right off the bat is that the idea of the omniscient, all-knowing physician needs to be abolished, and that needed to be abolished a long time ago. It is a control issue from the very start. Doctors don't like to be second-guessed in anything. And if you take a look in our state, in the state of Tennessee, the number one donor to our Physicians Health Program, which is the program that manages our impaired physicians, is State Volunteer Mutual, which is our malpractice carrier. And the reason is that they pay out less in malpractice claims against our impaired physicians than they do in the general physician population. So California needs to take a look around. There's some great models around the country to look at when it comes to dealing with impaired physicians if they'd open their eyes and take a look. So, some people, just refuse to take a look at the data, and I think California is in that situation right now. And what did you want me to, I'm sorry, the question.
Talk a little bit about how, yeah.
Right. My dad is the one that wound up intervening on me, and he noticed that I wasn't the son that he used to know. He had noticed weight loss. He had noticed behavioral changes, and so he started going to my colleagues and my nurses to try to figure out what was wrong with me. And basically he ran into the physician blue wall. Nobody wanted to get involved. Nobody wanted to help him. And he really worked on it for over a year before he decided to take matters into his own hands. And there were a lot of excuses. Well, they might be wrong. Something, I may not be using substances. Or they just didn't want to be involved. They had their own lives going on. Or I might get mad at them. Or they were my competition for patients, and I might look at it as them trying to steal my patients. There are a lot of different excuses. Nursing staff. My nurses make their living based off the number of patients that I see. And if I'm not there, then they won't have the income that I generate that pays their salary, that allows their kids to have food, or for them to be able to pay their rent on their house or the mortgage on their house. There's too many things standing in the way to allow our colleagues and our nursing staffs to intervene on us. We have to take it out of our hands. We've been incapable of doing that to this point. So my dad finally intervened on me himself, along with the help from my sister. We are incapable of policing ourselves.
I'm sorry, if you're comfortable, can you comment, we've been together before, so about the medical board's reputation around the country because of the cases you do with the DEA? The California Medical Board, about how they're viewed across the country based on your work with law enforcement.
Right. I do a ton of work with law enforcement across the country. And matter of fact, the first work that I did in the state of California was in Sacramento with law enforcement, and that was really my first foray into California. And I ran into law enforcement in Northern California who are incredibly frustrated as they deal with pill mill type doctors that they know are basically selling prescriptions or dealing in prescription narcotics to patients who are just taking the medications to the street and selling them or using them themselves for their own addictive purposes. And they send informants in. And one officer in Northern California told me a story of him taking an x-ray of a dog, a four-legged beast, into a physician's office and showing the physician that this was the reason that he needed the controlled substances that he was asking for. And the physician, of course, noted that he could clearly see the back trouble that the officer was complaining of, the undercover was complaining of. Of course, he didn't pay any attention that it was an x-ray of a dog, and he wrote him the prescription. Yet the California Medical Board won't take action on the physician until legal action is brought against the doctor. Now, the California Medical Board has the easiest way to take action, which is to summarily suspend the license. That's the quickest. I have a friend that says the wheels of justice grind slowly, but the wheels of injustice grind quickly, and that is true. The legal process takes a long time. The medical boards have the option or have the luxury of being able to react very quickly with a summary suspension and get these doctors away from prescribing these medications that kill people until the legal consequences or until the legal ramifications can be straightened out. Law enforcement in the state of California has their hands tied. The LA Times piece that Jamie was mentioning, I'd run into that piece just by happenstance when I was in Anaheim a couple of years ago, and I was absolutely appalled, first of all, that California has the problem that they have, and the other reason I was appalled was that you had one doctor who had so many overdose deaths to his credit, yet no action had been taken to intervene on this doctor at all. And it was just amazing to me. I can tell you that in Tennessee, he would have received multiple visits from the Physicians Health Program, if not the state medical boards.
And I should say that is why Prop 46 not only requires mandatory drug testing, but requires that if a doctor gets a verified positive result, they have their license temporarily suspended until they go into treatment. That's a really important part of this initiative because we have seen that the medical board is not capable of taking that step. There are so few interim suspension orders, there are so few removals of disciplinary actions in every year. I mean, a couple of dozen doctors with disciplinary actions for substance abuse, and we know there are thousands in the state, is really appalling. Any other questions here, or should I go to the phone line? Yeah.
Jerry, can you talk a little bit about responding to some of the no ads that talk mostly about the potential to sue doctors, right? Running doctors out of California, raising these malpractice insurance issues. They're not talking about any of the drug issues that you're talking about. They're focused entirely on that. And some people may believe that is all that this is about. Can you respond to some of those issues? And you talked a little bit earlier about, there's still a cap, but it's, it's higher than it used to be. What do you say to people who bring that part up?
Well, I mean, I think that ironically the No on 46 ads don't even address the cap or the fact that there has been a cap in place for 30 years. All they do is try to vilify trial lawyers who are going to get rich. And the fact is, innocent victims of medical negligence can't get access to justice with a $250,000 cap when they don't have wage loss or medical bills. So in the case of the death of a child or a senior citizen, we're looking at people whose families go to attorneys and get turned away year after year. We've been seeing this in Consumer Watchdog for 2 decades. I mean, 94 is when I started working on this project. And I've been talking to medical negligence victims ever since, and I can tell you it's the same story. They come, they have a real case or what looks like a real case, and they can't get an attorney to take it to court. And what happens is when you can't get an attorney to take a case to court and the medical board won't listen to you, that doctor keeps on practicing, be they high or just a bad doctor or just someone who made a mistake that needs to be corrected. And so the cap is not just a barrier to access to justice for the victims, but it is a way of allowing dangerous doctors to go on practicing. And what I find really appalling is that the medical profession doesn't acknowledge the bad seeds in the state of California. They just don't. And they don't police them. And if they did, we'd have a lot more common cause. And maybe that's going to be one of the outcomes of the 46 campaign is that we start to do better, because there are states that do a little bit better. I think they do better in Tennessee. And I'm really frustrated that this has gone on so long and the legislature will not act to adjust this cap after 38 years simply because the malpractice insurers and the hospitals and the doctors have the money. We've got the truth. This is an impediment to justice. There's no one who will deny that innocent victims are turned away from justice. But there's not enough money and campaign contributions from the innocent victims to get the legislature to listen. And a year ago, Bob Pack and I and Carmen and many victims went up to the Capitol. It was more than a year and a half, and we stood on the Capitol lawn and we said to the legislature, fix this or we're going to do a ballot initiative. You know what? We couldn't get one legislator to sponsor a bill. We tried hard. They didn't want a buck. The insurance companies and the doctors and the hospitals. And it's that retrenchment that is so frustrating. There's not even a little crack. And that's why this initiative, Prop 46, is there to send a message to the medical insurance complex that the public really has the right to choose. And we're going to do everything we can to get a voice out to the public about these issues. And the fact is, I think the public, once it hears the truth, that there is a cap, because most of the people don't realize there's a cap, that a jury cannot award what it sees fit, they're going to change the system. And the fact is, juries make very large pain and suffering awards and non-economic. I mean, millions and millions of dollars. And when they leave the room, the judge comes in and says it's reduced to $250,000. That's okay in California. It's not okay with the public when they learn. So we have the truth on our side. They've got the money. But I think that there's not a whole lot to respond to in those ads because they're so phony. The one issue I can say out of today's press conference, and maybe Dr. Loyd can address this, is not only will 46 save lives, but it is going to save money. And the way it saves money, and the legislative analysts acknowledge this, is the use of the Cures database, this electronic database. We have an estimate that we'll pass out that shows we'll save $400 million a year in Medi-Cal costs for prescriptions that aren't written for doctor shoppers, in community policing costs, and other costs that are associated with prescription substance abuse. And maybe Dr. Loyd can talk about the savings in Tennessee and New York to some degree, because we know when you check a database and don't prescribe to addicts, that saves a lot of money. The LAO in their fiscal impact says there will be significant, potentially significant savings to offset any cost from this initiative. And of course, the other side doesn't talk about that.
Tim, I want to address the micro issue for a second, because I am a physician and I'm not an attorney, and we're philosophically opposed to attorneys just as part of our DNA. Okay, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. And when I met Bob Pack and Carmen Pack and I listened to their story, how do you look them in the eye and tell them that they got justice? I really don't think that you can. To lose their two children, Troy and Alana, and then know multiple other cases across the state of California where you're talking about closure. One of the things when I learned Bob's story, and I didn't know Bob from Adam, 4 months ago, when I learned Bob's full story and the lady who acquired the prescription narcotics that she acquired, I serve as an expert witness for the federal government against doctors for improperly prescribing narcotics, and the doctors for Kaiser Permanente prescribed narcotics to this lady without taking a history or doing a physical examination that would indicate the need for controlled substances. How come those doctors were never prosecuted? How come they weren't held accountable for writing controlled substances to a lady who did not have an indication for them? Where did the California Medical Board weigh in on the fact that these doctors did this, essentially transforming themselves into legalized dope dealers? Bob got closure, in my opinion, in no way. And so that's why I agreed to do this. 2 of the 3 measures I supported right off the bat. Then when I heard of something called micro, which I had no clue of, I hesitated. I'm like, hold on a second, what is this? And then I heard Bob's story, and as I learned more of Bob's story, then I understand. I learned about how victims of something like this, like Bob and his wife, how many of those families wind up getting a divorce as they go through stuff like this, and the counseling that families have to go through, and the fact that there is no closure. It's just amazing to me that people are okay with this whenever you lose a child or a loved one who has no income potential or no medical bills, that you're okay with $250,000 being the limit. I'm not okay with it. It's not the right thing, and it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. So I am definitely okay with micro, and I have no dog in the fight. I don't live in California, and I'm not an attorney. Now, as far as the Controlled Substance Monitoring Data Bank, as a potential money saver, I don't think there's any question it'll be a potential money saver because of identification of people who are doctor shopping, who have addictive disease, and the potential to get those people treatment for their addictive disease and stop them in their tracks from going from doctor to doctor. If you look at those at people with addictive disease and look at what kind of resources that they utilize from a medical standpoint, number of trips to the ED, Think about how much each of those visits cost in each of the services that they utilize when they go to the emergency department. All of the CT scans, all the MRI scans that they have in workups for phantom diseases which don't exist, or phantom complaints that don't exist, in an effort to get to the bottom of their pain complaint, and the only reason that they have the pain complaint is to get the controlled substance. I think it's really hard to put a number on that. I think the potential savings is astronomical. Now, the part that does worry me is driving those folks from the legal prescribed market into the black market, and I think what California has to be on the lookout for is an uptick in heroin use, which we see across the country, which I think is where the Affordable Care Act comes into play in giving these folks access to treatment for their substance abuse, so that we don't simply drive this from the legalized prescription drug market into the black market. So I think the potential for savings is astronomical.
Doctor, a question regarding the medical malpractice insurance premiums you pay as a doctor.
Right.
One of the arguments from now on 46 would be that, are you prepared to actually pay additional premiums since they're already quite high?
Sorry. I would like to see where the justification for those additional premiums come from. I'm always wary anytime they tell me something's going to jump up. I'd like to see justification for those premiums. Are we actually seeing outlays of money that justify those premiums going up? And then we'll have to wait at that point, and I'm sure Jamie can answer the questions much better than me. But one of the things that I've read about, and like I said, I never thought I'd be this interested in a political race 2,500 miles from my home, but I see these federally funded programs for poor pregnant women that are going to be affected. As far as malpractice is concerned, the practitioners in federally funded programs are protected by the Government Tort Reform Act. They don't pay malpractice insurance in the first place. So it's always amazing to me when these things come up that the first thing that doctors want to do are pull out this poor, underserved population that's going to be affected and trumpet them. That's misleading. Those insurance premiums aren't going to be affected in the first place because they're protected by the Tort Reform Act, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that is true. In fact, I have a piece of literature I'll show you after on my desk, which doctors are handing out in their offices, which is with that phony privacy threat argument, and also this argument, which is where Dr. Loyd saw it, that clinics, community clinics, are not at all threatened by Prop 46 because they have protection under the Federal Tort Claims Act, which means they're not subject to medical malpractice cases. If they are sued, it's not their insurance that protects them. They opt into something called the Federal Tort Claims Act, and the federal government, on a basis of whether there is a tort, pays those claims. And so we've been astounded the way that this has been misused by the opposition. And we even have some of the clinics that appear on the website for Prop 46, No on 46. We can prove that they are Federal Tort Claims Act protected. Now, in terms of most doctors who pay malpractice insurance premiums, the guy on the other side of the glass window took care of a little bit of this because, unlike health insurance, until we passed Prop 45, malpractice insurance is tightly regulated in the state of California. Rates cannot go up unless malpractice insurers get permission from the state insurance commissioner. And the state insurance commissioner is looking at malpractice rates, and he has said it is a travesty. Malpractice insurance companies pay out about 30 cents of every premium dollar in claims. 30 cents of every premium dollar in claims. The rest they keep for profit, administration, and defense costs. 30 cents is nothing. Nothing. I'll give you an example. Under health insurance reform under the ACA, health insurers have to pay out 80 cents of every dollar to medical care. So 30 cents, the malpractice insurers in the state have a lot of room to pay out claims without raising rates because they've been getting fat and rich. And in fact, under the tools given to us in Prop 103, our organization has intervened and challenged rate hikes for malpractice insurers and lowered malpractice insurance rates for doctors in the state by $60 million. And I can show you the cases. The insurance commissioner has unilaterally jumped in and lowered malpractice insurance rates, and they can be lowered more. So it tells you really how cozy the doctors are with the malpractice insurers who have funded $5 million against Prop 46, that they're not talking to you about this tight regulation. The malpractice insurers are against 46 because they don't want to be responsible for legitimate claims that are filed against him, and they know if this is passed, that more patients will have legitimate claims, but they don't have to raise premiums because they've been getting rich and they've got a lot of room based on the premiums they're collecting now to pay out more claims. Should I go to the line on some questions? I should also say before, you can see why Dr. Loyd is named by the White House Office of National Drug Policy Control the 2014 Champion Advocate, because they're only one of America. Is there anyone on the line who'd like to ask a question? Speak up now.
Yes.
Hello?
Oh, hi, I'm Bobby Jenke in Santa Rosa.
Oh, Bobby, we're going to do media questions for now.
I'm sorry. I'll just keep listening. Thank you, Jamie.
Okay. Is there anybody in the media who'd like to ask a question on the line? How about in the room? Should we do that, or anybody in the room have a question? No. Bobby, we'll be around a little later, but people have been here for a little bit, so we're going to let them go, okay?
Sure.
Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? Thanks.
Fine.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, everybody.